Hello everyone and welcome to my library. I'm Tilda, and I have something very special for you all today involving a very special spider boy from a certain independent animated cartoon. You see, I had the random idea to take everything that makes the medium of 2D animation special, throw it out the window, and then try and cobble together something that resembles 2D animation if you squint, unfocus your eyes, walk all the way to the other side of the room, and just pretend it's the 90s again. That's right, today I'm going to be attempting stylized 3D... Hold on, I forgot to turn on the TV. Stylized 3D animation. It's like normal 3D animation, except an attempt is made to make the 3D look more like classical 2D, or at least less photorealistic. Whether by slowing down the frame rate to emulate the cost-saving measures of traditional animation, or by throwing a bunch of lines on the screen to make things look more like a comic. Of course, as an animator, I know that there's much more to films like Sony's Into the Spider-Verse than just throwing lines on the screen and lowering the frame rate. But also, as an animator, I don't usually have the patience for this sort of thing. I would much rather watch YouTube videos about animation than actually do anything myself. What? No, you're fine. Just keep watching. You probably don't have much going on in your life anyway. So now let's talk about Angel Dust from Hazbin Hotel. If there's one thing that stands out to me when watching this show, it's the vibrant, detailed, colorful character designs that are somehow miraculously brought to life on screen, despite the incredible effort it must take to draw things like Husk's wings, one keyframe at a time. And some designs don't even make that much sense, like, is this fur? Is it some kind of lava lamp? Is it a part of her outfit? I don't know. All I know is that I need to get out and socialize more. I mean, this girl can do it and she's made of goop. But Angel Dust is a nice compromise between sort of normal and kind of strange. His head and fluff bits in particular feel like they're facing multiple different directions at once. And he has 4 arms. Sometimes. But he's kind of just a regular tall guy. Sort of. I mean, he's not as glowy as Beelzebub. So I thought to myself, why not try to make this boy in 3D? I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll be a fun challenge. I didn't look into what other people did to bring him into 3D, like in the Steam Workshop for Garry's Mod or Source Filmmaker, because I'm kind of a purist in that regard. Besides, it makes it more of an exercise for me, specifically, to figure out how I would go about it. Also, the internet is scary, and I don't need more of it in my life than has already been forced upon me by algorithms beyond my understanding. So without any further explanation or preparation, it's time for me to bring this guy into the 3rd dimension, and to try and make it look as good as I can manage without going too crazy with perfectionism. I have struggled enough with that as it is. Alright, here we go. So in order to make a proper reference for the 3D version of Angel Dust, I have to draw him facing the front. Which is very cursed, I know. But later on I'm going to rig his hair to rotate around to a more appealing angle relative to the camera. Until then, though, I'm gonna need everything to line up and be perfectly symmetrical so that I only have to work on one half of the character for the reference, and for the model, where I will be using a mirror modifier. The side view is much more normal looking, which is good because this defines most of the actual shape of the hair that we'll be seeing most of the time. Also, I do draw the heart pattern on his chest, even though I don't end up incorporating it into the final model. It's just there for decoration, I suppose. So with everything set up, I moved to Blender to start the modeling process. I basically just started with a cube, subdivided it, and added a mirror modifier. This left me with enough vertices to push around to form the head, and I could simply extrude out certain parts to make the body and the limbs. I like working this way for quick little challenge videos like this because it's much faster. Faster being a relative term, of course. It still took me 3.5 hours to set this guy up for animation, not counting breaks, but you know. I then applied a subdivision surface modifier to give me more points to work with, because otherwise I wouldn't really have been able to model Angel's fingers or his sharp high heels. The subsurf modifier is good for smoothing out the geometry, but to make things pointy you have to either add a crease to the edges or add loop cuts and move the vertices closer together, or you can just do what I did and apply the modifier and move the points yourself. There may be better solutions, but at the end of the day I felt that this was just a head down, pedal to the metal and get this thing done sort of challenge. So I usually just did the first thing that popped into my head. The clothes were either added on top of Angel's body with face projection or just copied straight from the original mesh. I then had to apply a mask modifier to the original to turn off visibility for the parts of the body that were under the clothes anyway, to prevent unsightly clipping errors. And now I'm adding the materials, in addition to facial elements like the pupils, which are just flat circles, or the eyebrows, which I made from simple planes, because I wanted a more stylized look. I'm not trying to do a realistic remake of The Lion King here. I'm not a soulless corporation. The rest of the details were either a separate material, like with the eyelids, or painted on in texture paint mode. In order to add the teeth and tongue, I had to open the mouth in a non-destructive way so that I could close it easily when I was done. So I added a temporary shape key to make things easier to see. I also used shape keys for all the facial controls I add in later. The rig was generated with the Rigify add-on, which can be enabled in the Preferences window under Add-ons. I simply add a template skeleton from the menu, delete the face bones because this is not your standard human model. With me, they usually aren't. And then I move the rest of the bones around to line up with the model, which includes duplicating the arms because Angel has 4 of them. I was unsure if that would even work, or if it would break the add-on, but it ended up working just fine, so that was nice. And of course, breast controls. I don't end up using them in this challenge, but they're always nice to have. Also, I had to go into edit mode and add hair controls myself. This is what will help me avoid the cursed front-facing Angel look when I'm animating him. Then I just apply the rig to the model by parenting with automatic weights. This automatic weights option and the Rigify add-on make this whole process so much easier and are a huge reason why I'm able to do as much in 3D as I do. This definitely isn't the first time I've made a VivziePop character in 3D. And of course, I can always go back in and edit the influence of each bone, which I have to do with his hair to stop the bones from pulling on his eyes. And now it's time for the face controls. I added in shape keys for smiling, frowning, mouth open, mouth side to side, mouth pursing and widening, in addition to mouth movement and rotation for more stylized expressions, tongue movement, eyes closing, and pupil movement. One shape key I added, but didn't end up using, was one for clearing out either side of his face so that I could make a more crisp silhouette for profile shots. This is a form of what is known as cheating to camera, which is particularly important for stylized animation because it helps make the 3D models look more like drawings, with fully improvised perspective. It looked nice, but during the chaotic animation process I had to endure later, I didn't end up using that shape key and I didn't end up doing any profile shots. After adding a separate teeth model that I could turn on and off for when he's grinning and showing off his sharp white and gold demon molars, I added a vertex group for the left and right side of the face, copied the shape keys I already had, and assigned them both to each group, so that Angel could smile with one side of his face, or close only one eye, which will be necessary for him to wink, like he does in the show. And finally, I connected almost every shape key in the list to a corresponding facial control bone by using drivers, which is a process that looks scary but is actually quite simple. There are plenty of resources online to help you if you're ever confused at any point in the process. Basically, you can assign certain movements of the bones to certain shape keys, like, for example, pulling up and down in the corners of the mouth will influence the smile and frown shape keys respectively. You can also adjust the minimum and maximum, which sometimes get you a 2-for-1 deal in certain situations, like the mouth size controls. And you can also enable an option on the side panel that lets you view other shape keys in edit mode as you're working on the current one, which greatly helps you visualize how different shape keys can interact with each other. I used it to make a shape key for moving the mouth left and right while it's open, which allows for even more control over Angel's quirky expressions. And that concludes the 3D Angel Dust character rig creation process. And now that I have this boy all set up, it's time to bring him in. Angel? Hey Angel. Can you see him okay? He's a little tall. I don't think this library was designed with tall, 4-armed demons in mind. Oh dear. Can you talk? Do you want to say anything to the audience?
Remember, don't do school and stay in drugs.
Of course you'd say that. Alright, Angel, I think you've served your purpose tonight. Go ahead and leave. Just careful not to hit your head. The door's kinda low. Will you be okay? Do I need to call an Uber? Well, I guess he doesn't need that. He can just portal back to hell. Wait, he's not even the original Angel Dust. I made him after the cartoon already came out, and how is he sentient? And he stole my voice, too. He just sounds like me doing a bad impression. Oh my god, I don't want to think about the implications of this anymore. I think it's time to go back to the time-lapse. Anyway, yeah, so I had to pick a shot to recreate in 3D, and... Can you cut to the thing? I ended up going with the introduction scene where he's talking to one of his lucky customers through the car window.
It was a quick cash grab. You got it?
It's simple, it cuts off most of the body, and I get to animate Angel doing finger guns with 4 hands, so that was fun. This shot was mostly meant as a test to see how the model was working, and to try and find an animation style I liked. The plan was to do a more complex shot later, so I didn't want to stress about this first attempt too much. I threw down a simple shape for the window, nothing too fancy, just a flat plane with the hole in it, and I started doing the basic poses of the shot so I could animate the details later. I ended up adding a bit of extra set dressing to make it look more like the original, just so I could get the full feel of the scene. I even added some lights with a negative brightness value to add some shadows to the inside of the car. Yes, you can add negative lights. It's a bit of a Blender secret. Overall, I ended up polishing this more than I ever planned to originally because of how much I got into the rhythm of working on the scene. I think the hardest part was honestly getting myself to start more than anything else. Plus, it's fun to work on character expressions, so I might as well try to make them as good as I can. At first, I couldn't decide whether I wanted to do the animating on twos method and have a stop motion or traditional sort of effect, or if I wanted to just do it normally with Bezier interpolation, which is the default. I ended up going with the normal smooth option, mostly because I knew I could always try the cool stylized effect on the next shot, so this was a way for me to get a better idea of different methods I could use. I also added a grease pencil object with the line art modifier, and I put all of Angel's objects in a collection so I could reference it, along with the grease pencil layer and material, and I was able to give him some line art. I baked it to keyframe so I could adjust it manually and ended up, again, going quite a bit beyond my original intentions because, well, I could just see the results so clearly. All I had to do was some extra polishing and I could end up with something I was proud of. And, well, you can see for yourself.
It was a quick cash grab. You got it?
I like how this turned out. I don't think the shoulders of his suit are in the right place and his fluff could be a bit sharper, but overall, pretty good for a first try. Also, I'm glad he left. Having a demon in the library probably wasn't the best idea. At first I thought it looked a bit too smooth to really seem like 2D, but then I realized that it's never going to look like full 2D if it was made in 3D. Both mediums are fundamentally different after all. So coming to that conclusion gave me the freedom to just try different things and see what worked. Also, I like how grease pencil works in Blender, and how you can tweak it and add different colors and stuff. However, I don't really like having to find what control I'm looking for in a massive mess of bones, especially with Angel's 4 arms. But I didn't really feel like disabling layers that much. I'm kind of impulsive that way, at least when I'm doing a how much can I do in like only a few days sort of challenge. Though I guess the real reason comes down to my brain just firing off randomly. I can't predict everything I'll do. But with all that being said, there's one more shot I'd like to try to animate. And oh boy is it a bit of a doozy.
Don't get your taco in a twist, baby.
Was that you trying to be sexist or racist?
Whatever pisses you off more.
Oh yeah, full body, turning around, opening a compartment, hands moving all over the place. There's a lot to unpack with this shot. Well, might as well just throw myself into it and see if I can make it out the other end. But before I got started, I wanted to make some tweaks to the model. I ended up generating a new rig to fix the shoulders, and made sure everything rotated at the correct point, making his bow tie one object so that it wouldn't break apart when I tried to move the arms. And I also sharpened up his hair a bit. Normally going back and changing the rig stresses me out because I'm worried about breaking something. But this time around, I was okay with breaking a few eggs if it meant making a nice, snazzy omelet. So now it's onto the scene. So this time around, the background was complex enough that I decided that I didn't want to spend all my time doing detail work on the background for a challenge focused around character animation, so I just threw together yet another quick extruded plane and moved on. Of course, I also had to add the lid for the compartment that Angel opens. For the sake of time, I just made a cube with its origin point placed so that I could easily rotate it from its back edge. I really think that with shots like this, the best thing to do, for me at least, is to just start. When it's time for Angel to turn around and look in the compartment, I just go ahead and twist him around, let the limbs go everywhere, allow everything to break, and then just take a deep breath and correct it as I go. It helps keep things moving and is a big part of why I was able to finish this as quickly as I did. It's all about moving one step forward at a time. At the end of the day, that's all you can really do. I did go for the stop motion style, and I did it by changing the interpolation of the keyframes to constant instead of Bezier, which is the default interpolation setting I mentioned earlier. That way the character only moves on the frames where I specify a keyframe, and there's no smoothing of the animation, which is how it works in traditional animation where there is no interpolation and every new frame has to be drawn in, or photographed in the case of stop motion. I think it's a neat effect, but again, sometimes I prefer the smoother look. It really depends on how much I want to focus on the motion, or how much I want to focus on the posing of the character and overall layout, which I think stepped animation with constant interpolation really helps accentuate, because it makes working on the scene feel more like working on a storyboard, which honestly makes it ideal even if I want to switch the interpolation back to smooth later. However, for this challenge, I've just been throwing things together. I'm not exactly thinking that far ahead for this particular scene. Here, it's really more about getting something out the door, no matter what. And speaking of not thinking ahead, I wanted more control over the elbows, since it's not really clear how you're supposed to move those in the Rigify rig outside of using the tweak bones, which feels wrong for some reason, I guess since you can easily break your character's arms with those controls, and I didn't want things to look wrong. So I switched to FK mode instead of IK, which would have allowed me to keep Angel's hands firmly planted in place whenever he's leaning on something, sort of like what I did in the last animation with his secondary pair of hands. In all fairness, you can't see his elbows in that shot, so I didn't care as much about it then, but with FK, everything pivots from the shoulder down, which made for more realistic arm poses, but it meant that I had to constantly move his arms and hands into place as he moved around in his seat. Good grief. This was definitely the most frustrating part of this whole challenge. I cut most of it out though, so you don't have to look at it for too long, thankfully. I will say though, I'm quite proud of the last pose where he's slumped down, head in hand, while hanging onto the compartment with his other arm. It's very expressive, and I love that I was able to replicate it in 3D, even if I couldn't fully push his mouth to the side like in the original. That would have taken quite a bit more work, and I would have had to focus more on the rig, unless I wanted to create a shape key on the fly, which is what I do in this challenge to make sure that nothing is intersecting. But for fine control like that, it would have taken a lot of messing around that I didn't have the energy for in this challenge. I do feel that it definitely couldn't hurt to spend more time in the planning phase though. By the way, one tip for animating with constant interpolation is to use the breakdown tool, which allows you to easily create a new keyframe with a pose that's right in between the surrounding poses. You can adjust where in between you want the pose to land and click. Doing it this way really helped me realize just how much faster 3D animation can be than 2D once you have everything set up. But you do have to take the time to set it up. That's the catch. There's always a catch, isn't there? Anyway, for the grease pencil, I didn't put in nearly as much work as last time. I just threw it on there and turned down the opacity to make it look less uniform and more like a suggestion of lines, I guess. I think it looks alright, particularly since this shot is more zoomed out than the last one, so the details are less visible. I didn't even end up baking it, which definitely helped with moving things along since the last time I baked it, I had to manually adjust it to match every time I changed Angel's pose. So leaving it unapplied and impermanent did make things quite a bit easier. And after adding some shape keys to fix the intersecting issues and changing the lighting because adding too much soft lighting was super noisy in the viewport and had an annoying flickering effect when I rendered it, I present to you the final result.
Don't get your taco in a twist, baby.
Was that you trying to be sexist or racist?
Whatever pisses you off more.
Honestly, I'm quite pleasantly surprised by what I was able to accomplish with this challenge. If there's one thing I would do differently if I wanted these animations to really shine, I would spend a lot more time in the planning phase, studying the original show and thinking about how I would go about recreating certain expressions, and also making sure to set up the rig so that making changes later on is much easier. Maybe in the future I'll do a challenge where I just focus on Angel's face and try and recreate his expressions in 3D. I'd say to keep an eye out for that. I'm definitely interested in giving that a try. But for now, I'd just like to leave you with this. I know that there's a large crowd of people online that desperately wish for a return to theatrical 2D animation. After all, it's a whole lot more expressive and cool looking and nice and stuff, but I think that there's something to be said for 3D animation, particularly for hobbyists like myself. I mean, it's not like I have to advocate for it that much. I mean, look at the popularity of shows like The Amazing Digital Circus, for crying out loud. But regardless, I'd still like to talk about why I in particular like doing things in 3D. For one, it's an interesting technical challenge to take a crazy stylized character like Angel Dust off the page and into the world of computers and math. Not that you actually have to deal with that much math. I certainly never did when dealing with 3D, except for when trying to double the resolution in my export settings or doing mental math to figure out how close my renders were to finally completing so I could actually use my computer without everything lagging all over the place. But also, I just think it's incredibly cool to see what humble individuals with no ties to any large media corporations can do with cheap or even completely free software like Blender. And honestly, it doesn't really matter what medium you use. What really matters at the end of the day is, I don't know, the friends we made along the way or whatever, who cares. Anyway, if you want to see the full time-lapse and even try out this Angel Dust rig for yourself, consider subscribing to me on Patreon. There's a whole bunch of extra content on there, including an exclusive song and music video that I've had kicking around for the past couple years. I plan on releasing it at some point, but we'll see. And it's all for the very low price of just $2 a month, with the actual Angel rig I made in this video available for just $5 a month. In addition, I'm working on a comic. It's called Squirrel Power. I recently released an animated trailer for it, and I'm ready to start getting these characters on digital paper for you to read and vicariously live through. The first 10 pages are already available to read in rough form for my $2 patrons, and reception from them seems to be pretty positive so far. If you like this sort of content, which I have put quite a bit of effort into, becoming a patron will greatly help me out in terms of working on these videos full time, especially since I like to make things pretty high quality, if I do say so myself. And again, thank you for everyone who's already supporting me. It really means more than I can even put into words. A very special thank you to my esteemed $20 patron, The Unlocked Key, as well as patrons B.R. Wayner, Evelyn Fjord, Sand Tranquil, and The Big E. You guys are seriously the best. So with all that being said, thank you for coming, remember to be quiet in the library, and I hope to see you again, very soon. Tilda, out. Bye.